Hey everyone, it's Mary Brownlee, licensed professional counselor and trauma therapist. Sorry I've been missing in action. I know it's been quite a few months, and I'm going to tell you why. And that's what this video is about. And I made it for trauma survivors going through the political climate that we currently are in, which impacted me on a personal level. So I took a break. And if you're not interested in anything political, feel free to skip this video. You by no means protect your mental health. You don't have to watch this video. But if you're a trauma survivor, especially a narcissistic abuse survivor, and the current political regime in the United States has really taken a toll on your mental health, this video is for you. And if there's any trolls or nasty political comments, I'm just going to delete them. I'm not going to be responding to anybody who has anything negative to say. This is not for you. Not the video for you. Take it somewhere else. This is for people who've actually been struggling with their mental health because of the current political regime. That's it. That's who it's for. So, after the election, the November election in the United States in 2024, I had a bit of a backlash myself. And I just lost a lot of hope for a period of time. And I kind of went into protection mode where I just needed to cocoon myself, take a break, cocoon myself. And for a while, I didn't feel like talking about trauma because first and foremost, I'm a trauma survivor. And certain things can absolutely impact even my trauma layers. Even despite all the work I've done on myself and all the work I've done with my clients, I'm still a human being just like you guys. So this stuff does impact me on a personal level. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. How do we navigate really difficult times when they are hitting at and reminding us of trauma layers in our own families? Narcissistic abuse being one particular one that has a direct correlation with what we're seeing in the US on a big political level as well, which is narcissistic abuse. And then how do you maintain your own mental health when things are very difficult and reminding you of trauma and making you feel helpless? So stay tuned. I'm going to have some tips and we're going to break it down. All right, let's get started. So one thing I've been pretty open with on my own channel is that I come from a family with a lot of narcissistic traits and narcissistic abuse. So narcissistic families in general share several things in common. And if you have a narcissistic family, you will recognize a lot of these. I just whip these up real quick and I'll pull out my sticky notes here. So narc families, gaslighting is huge. All right. So essentially gaslighting is when, say you see I'm going to make up a crazy scenario, but just to make my point clear, say you see a dog run across the street and disappear into an alley. And you turn to somebody who literally was standing right there and saw the dog disappear into the alley. And you're like, oh my gosh, that dog just disappeared into the alley. The person who's gaslighting you is going to be like, no, there was no dog. What are you talking about? You're crazy. So that's gaslighting in a nutshell. That's happening right now on a national level. I'm sure you know what I mean. This area has been impacting you. Terrible things are occurring in the United States. Abuse of power is happening. Abuse of immigrants is happening. Abuse of LGBTQ people is happening. Lots of egregious, terrible things are happening that a lot of other countries are noticing and speaking up about. So guess what the regime is doing? They are making us feel like we're crazy and not seeing what we're seeing and hearing what we're hearing and experiencing what we're experiencing. We're all just crazy or too sensitive, gaslighting, invalidation. So a lot of these type of things that are happening politically hits at these trauma layers that those of us who grew up in narcissistic families already have. And that is a tremendous amount of invalidation and undercutting victims' realities. So if that's happening to you right now, that's the direct tie-in with the political climate right now. And so I'm just validating and pointing that out, that it's going to be upsetting to us when we already have layers of people attempting to gaslight our reality. Another commonality in narcissistic families and the current political regime is bullying and abuse. So bullying is obviously mistreating people with less power, name calling, humiliating them, doing egregious abusive behaviors to them, making them feel powerless. All sorts of abuse we've seen from this regime, from name calling and slurs and put downs and, very unprofessional behavior that if any one of us were to do any of the behaviors we're currently seeing from the political people in power now, we would be fired. Like, we'd be fired from our jobs. We'd be ostracized from our communities. We would lose friends and family if we treated them in these manners. And yet this is the stuff that's being able to just exist in the White House and the current political regime with no accountability. So that's incredibly damaging to those of us who grew up feeling disempowered and bullied and criticized and shamed and humiliated and a bunch of other things when we see the highest person in office also doing those behaviors unchecked with no counterbalance to it. So that's going to make us feel incredibly powerless as well, which taps into a feeling many trauma survivors can relate to, and why things are traumatizing in the first place is powerlessness. This regime makes us feel powerless. There is no checks and balances going on. The courts are trying to do their best, but Congress is not enforcing anything. And it just makes a lot of us feel completely powerless to do anything whatsoever to make things better and to protect people we love. So that is a direct tie-in to also narcissistic abuse that happened in our families. Many times we were silenced. We felt powerless. We couldn't push back against the family system. We were shunned and ostracized if we tried. So a lot of this is happening right now, but on a national scale. So if you are experiencing this as well, yep, this is what both myself and plenty of my clients with narcissistic abuse are experiencing as well. So you're not alone. So back to the little break that I took. So the reason I took a little break is I was experiencing tremendous grief. I think amidst everything, there was this disillusionment that the U.S., I already knew the U.S. had significantly more racism than I thought, significantly more nasty, terrible people in power. I already had gone through this kind of initial stage of disillusionment with the first election of this administration, but I really didn't think we would do this again to this country and elect somebody who was a criminal, who was a bully, who was a narcissist, but we did. So I went through this tremendous period of disillusionment and powerlessness and horrific grief at first, just heaviness and sadness and not really wanting to do much. And I felt like, why bother continuing to try to heal trauma and speak on trauma when it appears over here, that my country is falling apart and great, evil, for lack of a better word, is taking over and there's nothing any of us can do. So I just gave up. I gave up for a while. And so the grief stages, if you remember, are denials. At first, you go through this period of denial after something terrible happens where it doesn't feel real and you're just kind of numb. And then this bargaining stage can happen where you kind of go through the what ifs. What if we had done this? What if we had done that? Maybe that would have changed things. Anger is very common throughout grief, of either anger at the person who died in the case of grief over, death, or if it's a loss of some type, like in this case, the loss of our country, the loss of hope, the loss of dreams and hopes of what we wished our nation was. Yeah, anger, a lot of anger definitely was present for a long time. Depression, oh my gosh. So yeah, depression is another stage where you just feel lethargy and sadness and hopelessness and you just want to give up. And then finally, the final grief stage is acceptance. And acceptance is really where you have gone through all the other stages and they're quite messy, they're not linear. And you reach this stage of acceptance where you're like, I did the best I could, life must go on, and I will find a new normal. I can't quit. All right? And so that's where I'm at now, which is why I'm back on my channel and I'm going to continue to speak out on trauma because it's near and dear to my heart. And it's the answer for so much suffering in this world is trauma healing. We need healers right now more than ever. So I decided to get back in there. So next, I'm going to talk about some of my tips for sustaining yourself while we go through these really dark times. The first thing I wanted to mention, don't stop doing things you love. So even though it may feel really hard and hopeless and dark, you don't want to stop doing things that bring you joy. You don't want to stop doing things that are good for you, like exercise or nutrition. Sleep is really important. When we're going through a crisis, an emotional crisis, a physical crisis, very much feels like a crisis right now in this nation, you need to go back to basics. Self-care is going to be huge, and still finding time for joy and laughter is going to be huge. That is the fuel in the gas tank that's going to keep us going for the next, hopefully, only 4 years. But we have to be able to get through this. We can't just stop living. So you need to make sure that you're doing good self-care, taking time for naps, for rest, for walks, playtime with your pets, staying connected to people you love, doing things you enjoy, whether it's hobbies or, soccer or tennis. You want to keep living. My second tip is find community, whether that's online or in person. Maybe it's your colleagues, maybe it's neighbors, maybe it's family and friends. Find community and stay in touch with them. You don't want to be alone right now. When we're going through something traumatic, being alone makes it worse, actually. Plenty of research in the trauma field has indicated directly that those who move through trauma successfully have a social support system. So that is one of the biggest things that can help people survive very traumatic experiences, is community and social supports. So if you don't have many or want to build some, go ahead and look into doing that in whatever unique way that you are able to do so. You don't want to be alone right now. It's not good for us. It makes us feel more scared, more powerless. So find your people and stay connected to your people. My third tip is turn off the news. Turn off the news. You don't need to be doom scrolling on social media 24/7. You don't need to be listening to news or podcasts 24/7. You need to get a break. All right. It doesn't mean I want you to put your head in the sand and ignore any and all, headlines and what's going on, but you don't need to be plugged in 24/7. It is not good for you. It's not good for your mental health. Plenty of research has shown that social media and the news can be really bad for our mental health. So protect your mental health. Turn it off when you need to. You can always come back and check it when you're feeling like you have a bit more energy to do so. My fourth tip is something that I pull a little bit from my kind of Buddhist background. I really love a lot of teachings and philosophy and wisdom that Buddhism has taught for thousands of years. And so one thing I like to remind myself is there's nothing really other than constant change in this world. If there's one thing we can look back through history, thousands and thousands of years, is that people who are evil come into power and they pass, and they come into power and they're overthrown. You get the picture. Change is the only constant, and change takes time. And whatever is going on here now did not happen overnight. It is certainly, no doubt, has come about from decades of problems that the US has had. And we're kind of seeing this really explode and be on the surface right now. But it didn't happen overnight, and it won't be solved overnight. So pacing ourselves is important. We don't have to solve it all today. Pace yourself. Change takes time. There are good people working on this. And it takes time sometimes for people who have negative intentions to be overthrown or taken out of power. My fifth tip is donate to causes you care about. I know we feel really helpless and powerless right now, so this is a way to counter some of that. If you want to put good out into the world, feel free to donate to organizations you care about. Maybe it's the ACLU, maybe it's the Humane Society, but pick different things that are important to you and stay plugged in, donate to them, volunteer. That can help alleviate feelings of powerlessness and do good in the world as well. And my last tip is, if you're still struggling and you're feeling a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, maybe your PTSD or your trauma symptoms have increased since the election, feel free to reach out and find yourself a qualified trauma therapist near you. Again, that social support, even if it's a therapist, super helpful. You're not alone. I can't tell you how much this has impacted people I know directly, emotionally and mentally. Most of my clients, it's deeply, deeply impacted where their trauma symptoms have gone way up. My own well-being was impacted. You're not alone, actually. There's a lot of us who are not talking openly about this, but there's more of the good guys than there are of the others. You're not alone. We're in this together, and definitely seek out mental health supports if you're struggling right now. I hope you found my video helpful. I plan on making more content regularly. I just had to take a break for my own mental health. And I've missed all you guys, and I appreciate all the comments you guys still have been leaving. I know plenty of the IFS content has been very popular still. I'll get back to that. I'm getting trained in EMDR soon, which is really exciting. I've had additional training in IFS. So I got plenty of other good content coming for trauma survivors. And if you have any questions, if you'd like me to cover any topics, feel free to drop your comments below, okay? And I'll definitely do my best to answer them. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.